I grew up hearing that Clay County woods had a way of swallowing things. Deer, dogs, hunters, even sound seemed to get lost out there. Folks around here say the trees are older than anything that should still be breathing. I used to laugh at that, but I stopped laughing after what happened in the fall of 2019. I was hiking alone, which I know sounds stupid now, but I'd done it 100 times before. I liked the quiet. I liked the way the world narrowed down to the sound of boots on leaves and the smell of dirt and pine. That day, though, the air felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. I noticed the smell first. It wasn't decay exactly, more like wet animal fur mixed with old bark. It came and went with the wind, sour and thick, and I remember thinking maybe a bear had passed through. But there weren't any prints. Nothing living had moved through that path in a long while. By mid-afternoon, I reached a clearing where sunlight managed to break through the canopy. That's when I saw it, a figure crouched low near the far edge, right where the shadows met the grass. It was pale, still, almost blending into the tree line. For a moment I thought it was a hunter, maybe someone cleaning a deer. I raised a hand and called out, but it didn't move. I remember squinting, trying to focus. Then, as if someone pulled invisible strings, it stood up, spine bent backward, limbs too long for its body, and slipped into the brush with a cracking sound that made my skin crawl. Not the clean crack of a branch breaking, but the wet sound of joints moving wrong. I stood there for a long time, just listening. The forest was silent, not even a crow calling. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe just shadows and nerves, and went on, pretending I wasn't shaken. But the feeling of being watched never left. Every so often I'd hear a soft shuffle behind me, the kind that makes your neck tighten. Once or twice I caught movement in my peripheral vision, a flash of pale among the trees. But when I turned, it was gone. By dusk, I reached the creek and decided to set up camp. The sun died quick behind the ridges, leaving everything bathed in that cold blue light before dark. I got a small fire going and cooked what little I had, but I wasn't hungry. The smell was back, closer now, musky and thick, like something wet crawling through leaves. I told myself it was an animal. But when I heard footsteps circling just beyond the firelight, slow, deliberate, and barefoot, I stopped pretending. I held my flashlight and listened. The steps would stop whenever I moved, start again when I stayed still. I finally shined the beam toward the sound. The light hit the edge of a tree, then something ducked behind it. Fast. I caught a glimpse, a shoulder maybe, or the curve of a head. Then silence. I called out, told whoever it was I had a gun, a lie, and that I'd shoot if they didn't leave. No answer, just that awful hollow quiet. I didn't sleep that night. The thing, whatever it was, kept circling. Sometimes it got close enough that I could hear it breathe. Other times I'd see eyeshine in the dark, low to the ground, too far apart to be human. Around 3 a.m., it stopped. Not drifted off. Stopped, like it decided something. I sat frozen until the first hint of daylight broke through the fog. The woods looked normal again, calm, indifferent. I tried to convince myself it had just been some trespasser or wild animal. But when I checked my cooler, everything was gone. Meat, bread, even the sealed cans. Scattered around the ashes were handprints pressed into the mud, too long with deep nail marks, and there were only 3 fingers on each. I packed up fast and started heading for the ridge. The woods felt wrong in daylight, like it was watching me leave. I didn't stop for water or food. I just walked, trying to make it to the trailhead before dark. But halfway up, I heard something call my name. Soft, clear, my own voice. It came from down the hill, maybe 50 feet behind me. I froze. The sound came again. The same tone, same words I'd yelled the night before. Hey! But it wasn't an echo. It had weight, breath. I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand, and saw movement near the trees. A figure hunched at the base of an oak, skin pale and tight over bone. It was crouched, swaying slightly. Then it tilted its head and called again. In my voice, I ran. I don't even remember choosing to. The trees blurred together as I crashed through them, cutting my arms on branches, slipping on roots. I didn't stop until I hit the gravel road near my truck. When I finally looked back, there was nothing. Just still woods and the faint sound of wind. I drove straight home and didn't go back for weeks. A few days later, I told my friend Dean about it. He hunts those hills sometimes and said he'd take a look. He came back pale as chalk, Said there were fresh carcasses strung up by the creek, not gutted or skinned, just hung. Deer, rabbits, even a stray dog, all with pieces missing. He said he'd found my campsite too, but the fire pit had been filled with bones. Small ones, not animal. I moved out of Clay County the next spring. Couldn't stand hearing the woods at night. But sometimes when it's quiet enough, I still hear it. That soft call, like someone trying my name on for size. And every time I go hiking now, no matter how far away, I catch the smell first, wet animal and rotted bark, and I know the trees are watching. They always said Miller's Ridge breathed. When I was a kid, it was just one of those things grown-ups told us to keep us from wandering too far. Like the ridge itself might inhale you if you got too close. I used to roll my eyes at it, even dared a buddy once to camp there overnight. We chickened out before sundown. I didn't think about it again until last fall, when my truck decided to die right in the middle of that stretch of road. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of still autumn day where even the birds seemed to nap. I just left a buddy's place up near Salt Lick and was cutting through back roads, no cell service for miles. The truck sputtered once, coughed, and quit. I sat there for a minute, trying the ignition. Nothing but the low groan of an empty battery. Then the silence settled. No bugs, no birds, no wind through the trees. Just a quiet so thick it made the world feel hollow. I popped the hood, pretending I knew what I was doing. That's when I heard it. A deep, dragging sigh that came from the ground itself. The kind of sound you feel in your feet before your ears catch up. I froze, leaning against the fender, staring at the dirt along the shoulder. Another groan rolled beneath me like something shifting under tons of earth. Then, a few yards away, the leaves started to move. At first it looked like a mole tunneling, just a ripple in the ground. But the shape kept rising until a pale hand pushed through, fingers clutching at roots and soil. I can't tell you why I didn't run. Maybe I was too shocked. Maybe I thought it was a prank. The hand pulled harder, and then a shoulder, a bald head slick with mud. A man crawled out of the earth. He was naked, hairless, his skin stretched too tight. His eyes were milky, like boiled eggs, and his mouth worked open and shut like he was trying to breathe for the first time. When he finally looked at me, I took a step back. His teeth were chipped to the gums, broken like he'd been chewing rock. He stared right through me and whispered, "It's crowded down there." That's when the smell hit, wet clay and rot, like an open grave after rain. I stumbled back, got in the cab, locked the doors. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't even get the keys to turn. The man stood there for a second, head tilted, then dropped to all fours and scuttled toward the ditch, vanishing under the brush. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes waiting for him to come back. He didn't. I finally managed to get the truck started again. No idea how. Maybe dumb luck. And drove the rest of the way home in silence. For days after, I tried to convince myself it had been some sick meth head or an escaped patient. But I couldn't shake his voice, that phrase echoing over and over, "It's crowded down there." I told my brother about it. He laughed, said I'd seen a ghoul. But the next weekend, curiosity got the better of me. I went back. The road looked different in daylight, ordinary, even peaceful. I parked and walked up toward the ridge. The soil was soft, damp even though it hadn't rained in weeks. When I reached the spot, I saw the hole, half collapsed, like something had dug its way out. Around it, the earth pulsed faintly, almost too subtle to see unless you stared. I crouched down and laid my hand flat. The ground was warm, then came another groan. Louder this time. It vibrated through my bones. I stepped back, heart hammering, and saw more movement in the soil. Not just one spot, dozens. The ridge itself seemed to rise and fall, a slow exhale spreading across the forest floor. The air grew thick and heavy, carrying the smell of rot again. I turned to run but tripped, falling hard. My palm sank into the dirt and I swear it moved beneath my hands, soft like flesh. I scrambled up, but not before I heard it. Whispering. Hundreds of voices just below the surface, muttering in unison. Too faint to understand except for one line they all seemed to share. "It's crowded down there." I ran until I couldn't breathe. Drove home without looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't tell anyone this time. But 2 nights later, lying in bed, I felt something strange, like a faint tremor beneath the house. My glass of water rattled on the nightstand. I told myself it was a truck on the highway. Then I heard it again, distant but unmistakable. A low groan from below, followed by a soft whisper threading through the floorboards. "It's crowded down there." I moved away from Clay County that winter. Haven't been back to Miller's Ridge since. But some nights, when everything goes quiet and the house feels too still, I swear I can hear the ground breathing. The old Whitlow mine had been sealed off since '78, after a collapse killed 6 men. At least that's what the records said. Folks in the area talked about it like a wound that never healed. How you could still hear the men calling for help in the early hours, their voices carried up through the vents when the wind hit just right. Most of that was superstition, of course. I'd heard stories like that my whole life growing up in eastern Kentucky. Every ridge, every hollow had something dead or half forgotten buried under it. But Whitlow was different. Even the county surveyors avoided that slope when they could. I didn't have that choice. The company I worked for had me marking out the new power line corridor across Clay Ridge, which meant hiking rough country and old mining land. My job's mostly solitary. Just me, my maps, GPS, and a thermos of coffee that's usually gone by noon. The morning I found the tracks, the fog was still thick enough that the world looked half unreal. I was coming down from the north face, heading toward the creek line, when I saw something strange in the clay. Bare footprints, small, a child's maybe. They crossed the path I'd flagged the day before and disappeared into the brush that led toward the sealed entrance of Whitlow. At first I thought it was some kids playing around, maybe from one of the trailers down by the service road. But there were no tire marks nearby, no signs anyone had been up there. Just the tracks. I followed them about 20 yards before they reached the mouth of the mine. The entrance was half collapsed, a rusted gate and a concrete slab bolted over it. Except the bolts weren't there anymore. Someone had pried the whole thing open enough to crawl through. The footprints went right in. Now I've been doing this work for nearly 15 years. I've seen squatters' camps, meth cook sites, even old hermits living in hunting blinds. But this, bare feet going into a sealed mine, set my nerves on edge. Still, curiosity has its way of outpacing common sense. I set my pack down, took my flashlight, and ducked in. The air hit me first. It was thick with dust and the kind of rot that sits heavy in the lungs. Every step stirred up old coal and damp earth. I could see drag marks along the floor, maybe from where rocks had been moved. A little farther in, the light caught something glinting on the walls, tiny flecks that looked like wet soot. Then, deeper still, the tunnel widened, opening into one of the main chambers. That's where I saw it. Light, not electric. Not natural, flickering. Someone had lit torches, crude ones, made from sticks wrapped in what looked like burlap. They were jammed into cracks in the rock, throwing long shadows across the walls. And those walls, they were covered in drawings. Charcoal sketches, smeared with greasy fingers, figures of men hunting deer, fighting bears, dancing around what looked like fires. The kind of thing a child might draw, but older, primitive. Crude spears and stick bodies. Above them, something like a sun, drawn with thick black lines radiating outward, but the rays looked like hands. That was when I heard it, a sound like shuffling feet somewhere behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned, my flashlight slicing through the dark. Nothing, just a wet echo that carried deeper into the mine. I called out, "Hey, who's there?" But my voice came back in fragments, broken by the tunnel's shape. I waited. Then came the breathing, low, wet, close. It wasn't the sound of someone winded. It was slower, raspier, like someone trying to breathe through mud. I swung the light back toward the chamber, and that's when I saw movement. A shape crawling along the floor, dragging something behind it. The beam caught a face, or half of one. Skin slick with black soot, eyes glinting like glass marbles. It hissed and scuttled sideways out of the light, vanishing between two support beams. I didn't move. Couldn't. The sound of dragging bone followed, faint and quick. I should have left right then. Any sane person would have. But the moment I turned for the exit, something shifted in the dark ahead. A soft scrape, then another light flicker, deeper down the tunnel. I wasn't alone. Not by a long shot. I backed away, slow, trying not to make noise. The tunnel angled downward, air getting thicker. My flashlight started to dim, the battery whining. I clicked it a few times, whispering a curse under my breath. That's when another light bloomed ahead, faint orange like firelight, but moving. Someone, or something, was carrying it. A figure emerged, hunched and bare. Its skin blackened completely, eyes reflecting the torch it held. Then another stepped out beside it. and another. 3 of them, silent, crouched low, all painted the same way, black from head to toe with streaks of red clay around their mouths. They didn't blink. They just stared. I raised my hands, trying to sound calm. "I don't mean no trouble," I said. My voice cracked. They tilted their heads, in unison, like birds watching something shiny. Then from behind them came a 4th, taller, slower. It carried a long bone, deer femur maybe, wrapped with sinew. When it stepped closer, I saw its mouth wasn't painted red. It was bleeding. I ran. The tunnel spun into chaos. My boots slipped on wet stone, torchlight bouncing wild behind me. I could hear them now, feet slapping against the floor, fast, uneven, too many limbs. The air filled with the smell of smoke and something else, something metallic and sour. My flashlight flickered out completely, plunging everything into black. I ran blind, one hand against the wall, until I hit the mouth of the mine and burst out into daylight. Gasping, I didn't stop until I reached the truck. That night I filed my report but left out the mine. Said I couldn't complete the southern survey due to unstable ground, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes I saw their faces, those blackened shapes and that bleeding mouth. I told myself it had to be squatters, maybe feral families hiding out. I almost believed that. Until 3 days later, when I went back to collect the GPS unit I'd dropped. The entrance was sealed again, not with concrete or steel, with rock. Packed tight like something had filled it in by hand. But on the slab that used to cover the entrance, someone had drawn in soot, a symbol, the same hand-shaped sun from the chamber. After that, I stopped taking field jobs alone. But a few months later, a local deputy called me, said hikers had found a dead coyote near the ridge. Its fur was singed and its mouth was filled with small stones. "Weirdest damn thing," he said. Looked like a burial. I told him about the mine. He went to check. Said the whole slope had collapsed since then. Nothing but rubble now. That should have been the end of it. But last winter, during a snowstorm, I got a call from my foreman. They were running new lines past the old corridor. Said the snowplow had cleared the road and found something odd sticking out of the ditch, a piece of timber burned black. Carved into it was the same hand-shaped sun. He joked that maybe the old miners were still down there keeping warm. I laughed with him. But that night, as I was sitting in my kitchen, I heard something on the wind, faint but clear. A long, drawn-out breath, followed by a wet cough. I went outside, thinking it was the pipes freezing. But the sound wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from the ground. You ever hear breathing where there shouldn't be any? You know it right away. It's not just a sound, it's a presence, like the earth itself has lungs. I stood there for what felt like minutes until the breathing faded. Then the quiet set in. The next morning I found bare footprints in the snow leading away from the back porch. Small ones, bare. They stopped halfway across the yard and vanished into the white. I told myself they must have been animal tracks. I even measured them, but the distance between steps was wrong, too long. And that night I started dreaming, always the same. Crawling shapes, black and slick, moving through tunnels that seemed to go on forever. I'd wake up gasping, tasting coal dust and smoke. Last week the company called again. They want me to head back up near Clay Ridge to finish the new survey. I told them no. They said it wasn't optional. The line's already approved. So tomorrow I'll go. But I keep thinking about those drawings, those hands reaching down from the sun. I think they weren't pictures of worship at all. I think they were maps, directions. And if what I heard that night was real, if those tunnels still breathe, then maybe the Whitlow mine wasn't just sealed to keep people out. Maybe it was sealed to keep something in. I used to deliver mail through a forgotten stretch of road near Lost Hollow. Most days it was peaceful, empty woods, quiet air, the kind of stillness that felt safe if you didn't think too hard about it. But every few months, without fail, I'd hear something out there. Screams, short, sharp, echoing through the timber like someone being dragged. The sheriff told me it was coyotes. He always said it like he was trying to convince himself more than me. One winter morning, the kind where the cold makes your breath feel solid, I saw something that's been stuck in my head ever since. The road had frozen over, dusted in snow. No tire tracks but mine. About halfway through the route, I noticed a trail of boot prints leading off the shoulder into the trees. I almost didn't stop, but the pattern caught my eye, each print deep, uneven, like whoever it was had been running. The tracks ended maybe 50 feet in, right where the snow turned red. I should have called it in, but curiosity's a curse that runs deep in me. I followed the tracks until I saw it. A cabin, half buried under twisted roots and moss, like the forest had been trying to swallow it for decades. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney, though there wasn't a sound anywhere. My first thought was that someone might need help. My second was that no one who lived this far out wanted visitors. The door was warped, the wood soft with rot. When I pushed it open, the smell hit first, metallic, heavy, like iron left too long in rain. The place looked frozen in time. Furniture carved by hand, a table set with cracked plates, a bed against the wall under a tattered quilt. But what caught my attention were the bones. They hung from the rafters on strings of sinew, clinking softly when the draft hit. Some were long and thick, animal I thought, but others were small, delicate, too small to be deer. The fire in the hearth was still burning, low and steady. Someone had been here not long ago. I took one step inside and the door swung shut behind me. I turned, half expecting a draft, but before I could grab the handle, I heard breathing. Not mine, wet, ragged, coming from the dark corner by the bed. "Hello?" I called, though my voice sounded strange in that small space. A figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate. At first I thought it was a man. Then I realized the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, shoulders narrow as a child's, but with the gait of someone older. The face was smeared in ash, the eyes reflecting the firelight like an animal's. It opened its mouth, and what came out didn't sound like a person talking. It was more like several voices trying to share one throat. "We don't want you here," it said, the tone flat, empty. I backed toward the door, fumbling for the latch. The thing took another step, head tilting to the side. The smell of iron grew stronger. "We don't want you here," it said again, quieter this time, as if repeating something it didn't understand. I got the door open and stumbled into the snow, sprinting toward the truck. I didn't look back until I reached the road. When I did, the smoke from the chimney was gone. The cabin was just shadows under the trees. I filed a report that day, told the sheriff everything. He drove out there the next morning and called me from the site. Said there wasn't any cabin, just a clearing, some old stone foundation overgrown with roots. He laughed about it, said maybe I'd been drinking or seen fog. I didn't argue. A week later, my supervisor reassigned the route. Said there'd been complaints about packages going missing near Lost Hollow. I didn't fight that either. Still, sometimes when I drive near that area, I roll down the window and listen. There's a certain sound the wind makes through those trees, a faint wail that dips and rises, just like a voice being pulled through distance. And every now and then, when the snow's heavy enough, I swear I see fresh boot prints leading off the road. They always stop at the tree line. They never come back out. When I was younger, my friends and I used to hike near Beartown, a stretch of Appalachian forest so dense it felt like twilight even at noon. It was early spring, still cold enough that the ground was slick with old frost. There were 4 of us that day, me, Jason, and the Miller twins. We'd parked near the trailhead and hiked up toward the ridge, joking and tossing rocks at trees, just trying to shake off the stillness that place carried. Beartown wasn't on any official map. The locals said it wasn't worth mapping. Too many hollows, too many stories. About an hour in, we stopped for water near a laurel thicket that ran along a creek. That's when we heard it, the sound of something moving inside the brush. Not a squirrel or deer, heavier, slow. Jason shushed us and crouched down, his eyes locked on the green tangle. The rustling stopped, and for a few seconds, everything went quiet. Then the branches parted, and a woman crawled out. She was naked, covered in mud so thick it cracked as she moved. Her hair hung in clumps over her face, and her skin was gray under the dirt. At first I thought she was hurt. I remember whispering, "Ma'am, are you okay?" But she didn't answer. She moved wrong, jerky, animal-like. Her limbs bent at strange angles, her fingers digging into the wet earth. Then she lifted her head. I'll never forget the sound her neck made, bones popping like twigs. She sniffed the air, her nostrils flaring. Then, in one motion, she arched backward, her spine bending so far I thought it would snap, and bolted into the trees with an inhuman speed. Jason yelled after her, but she was gone before he finished the word. The woods swallowed her whole. We stood there for a long time listening. The only thing we could hear was the creek and our own breathing. I remember my heart hammering, my throat dry. When we finally started back down, none of us said a word, but we all kept glancing over our shoulders. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, pale, hollow, and streaked with mud. I told myself she was some lost hiker, maybe delirious. But the way she moved, it wasn't right. A few days later, I stopped by a small diner near the trailhead, one of those places where the same 5 locals sit in the same seats every morning. I mentioned what we'd seen to the waitress, half laughing it off. The conversation around the counter went silent. "You saw her," one old man said. "The hollow woman." He told me she'd been around for years. Said she used to be part of a family that lived deep in the mountains before the flood of '92 washed their home away. The search team found their house buried in mud and timber, but no bodies. Folks said she was the daughter, the youngest, survived somehow. But when they finally spotted her weeks later, she wouldn't come down from the ridge. Wouldn't talk. They said she still watched from the trees when people passed by, crawling on all fours like something wild. I tried to laugh it off, but the way he said it made my stomach twist. "You're saying she's still out there?" I asked. He nodded, eyes fixed on his coffee. "Some folks think she forgot how to be human. Others think she just decided not to be. I didn't go back to Beartown for almost a year after that. When I finally did, it was autumn. The air had that wet, heavy chill that makes sound travel strange. I hiked alone, just to prove to myself I wasn't afraid. The trail was quiet. Too quiet. Around the same bend where we'd seen her before, I stopped. There in the mud were prints, bare feet. Small, but deep, fresh. I followed them a few yards until they vanished into the brush. I don't know why I did it, but I whispered, "Hello?" From somewhere ahead, something answered. Not a word, just breathing, slow, deliberate, almost curious. Then came the smell, earthy like rot and wet soil. The kind of smell that tells you something's been buried and didn't stay there. I turned and started walking fast, my chest tight. The sound of branches snapping followed me, matching my pace. When I finally broke into a jog, the sound stopped. The woods went still again, but I could feel eyes on me, like the trees themselves were watching. When I reached the car, there was mud smeared on the driver's side window. 4 long streaks, like the marks of a hand that didn't know how to hold still. That was 3 years ago. I moved 2 towns over since then, got a job that keeps me indoors. But sometimes, when it rains heavy, I swear I can smell that same scent through my window, wet soil and decay. And once, late at night, I caught myself watching the tree line across the road. There was movement there. Low to the ground, crawling. I told myself it was a deer. Told myself a lot of things. But every so often, when the night is still enough, I think I hear breathing just outside the glass. Slow, steady, waiting. Writing I worked as a ranger out near Spruce Gap for almost 7 years. It wasn't a busy post. Mostly wilderness, old growth, and the kind of silence that sinks into your bones. The job was steady until the reports started coming in. Campers missing, always around the new moon. First it was a couple from Knoxville, then 2 hunters from Pike County. No signs of struggle, no blood, just camps torn apart like the people vanished mid-step. Most rangers chalked it up to getting lost or falling into one of the sinkholes that dotted the area. But I'd been doing this long enough to know when something didn't fit. That's why I stayed out one night. I parked the truck near mile marker 12 and hiked up to the ridge with a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, and my radio. The forest was still, too still. No owls, no bugs. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. I sat near a boulder and waited, my breath clouding in the cold air. Around 2 in the morning, I saw the first light. A flicker on the ridge across from me, orange, faint, then multiplying. Not flashlights, torches. I radioed dispatch, but the static came through thick and loud, like something was jamming the signal. Then I heard it, the sound of hooves. Slow at first, then faster, pounding through the trees. I ducked behind the boulder, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. The hooves got closer, but no horses appeared. What broke through the trees instead were 5 figures, lean and fast, their skin glistening with sweat and ash. They moved like shadows, barefoot, their faces smeared black. One of them stopped just a few yards away, sniffing the air like a dog. His teeth were filed sharp, jagged as broken glass. They made sounds I still can't forget. Clicking, whistling, guttural calls passed between them like code. They circled something ahead in the clearing, torches bobbing in rhythm. I couldn't see what they were doing until one of them crouched and placed something on the ground. The light caught it, a skull. Human, small, maybe a child's. The others joined him, arranging stones and bones in a circle, muttering low sounds that made the air feel heavier. I don't know how long I hid there. Time didn't feel right. Minutes stretched out, hours bled together. At one point, one of them lifted his head and turned toward my boulder. I swear he was looking straight at me. He let out a soft whistle, almost musical. The others froze, heads turning in unison. Then, all at once, they sprinted into the trees, torches vanishing like fireflies being snuffed out. I stayed frozen until dawn. When I finally crept into the clearing, the smell hit me first. Iron and smoke. The circle of stones and bones was real, not a trick of the dark. The skull was gone, but the ground was warm, like a fire had just been buried. I found hoofprints in the mud, deep and heavy, leading nowhere. No horses, no people. Just tracks that ended at the base of the ridge as if they'd sunk straight into the earth. When I got back to my truck, the radio light was dead. Not off dead. I replaced the batteries twice. Nothing. I didn't tell anyone right away. I waited a week, then drove to the ranger station to file a report. The moment I mentioned torches and figures, the room went quiet. My supervisor pulled me aside and told me to keep that kind of talk off the record. He said the forest had its own history, and that stirring it up only led to more problems. A month later, I went back, part curiosity, part stubbornness. The clearing was different. The stones were gone, but someone had carved symbols into the trees, circles intersected with crosses, rough but deliberate. The air there was heavy, like the place was holding something it didn't want to give back. I left a motion-activated camera tied to one of the trees, facing the ridge. When I checked it a week later, the card had only 2 clips saved. The first was me walking away. The second was filmed sometime around midnight. It showed the same clearing, empty at first. Then one by one, figures stepped out from the dark, their torches glowing faint. They stood there for a long time, facing the camera. The last frame was one of them crouching low, looking straight into the lens, mouth open, teeth shining. I don't work there anymore. I moved south, near Asheville, but every new moon I still wake up at the same hour, 2 a.m., to the faintest sound outside my window. Clicks, whistles, like something reminding me it remembers too. I grew up in Pine Knot, Kentucky, a place most folks forget exists unless they're lost or looking for somewhere to bury a secret. When I was younger, I used to hike the old mining trails that ran through the hills behind town. Even after moving away, I'd come back every now and then, just to feel that old quiet. There's something about Appalachian silence. It's not peaceful, it's heavy. It feels like the woods are listening. Last spring, I came back for a weekend, hoping to clear my head. I parked near an abandoned quarry and hiked out along a ridge that looked down over the valley. Around midday, I found something I'd never noticed before. A crack in the hillside, half hidden under roots and moss. A cave. It wasn't marked on any map I knew, and I'd seen enough of them to recognize the difference between a shallow pocket and something deep. The air that came out of that opening was cold, like stepping into a cellar. I switched on my flashlight and ducked inside. The first 20 feet were narrow, but it widened fast, sloping down into a chamber big enough to stand in. The walls were covered in handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the rock like fossilized paint. Some were small, some wide, some smeared like they'd been dragged. There was no color, just dark stains baked into the stone. I remember saying, "What the hell?" out loud, and the sound bounced back in layers, repeating my voice from different directions. That's when I heard it, my name, faint, like someone calling from deeper in the cave. I froze, listened. It came again, clearer this time, same voice, same tone I'd just used. I told myself it was an echo trick, something about the shape of the tunnel, but my gut didn't buy it. The air felt wrong, still, heavy with dust. Then I saw the flicker of light further down, like firelight. I followed it, one step at a time, thinking maybe someone was camping inside. The tunnel curved and opened into another chamber, and that's where I saw them. 3 figures crouched around a fire pit. Their skin was pale, stretched tight over bone, and their clothes, or what was left of them, hung like rags. The firelight hit their faces and their eyes reflected it, glowing back at me like the eyes of a raccoon caught in headlights. One of them lifted its head and smiled. Its teeth were small, uneven, but it wasn't the teeth that got me. It was the way it looked at me, like it knew me. "You finally came back," it said. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat locked up. I just turned and started running, but the tunnel didn't feel the same anymore. The walls were closer. My shoulders scraped stone that hadn't been there before. I dropped the flashlight when I stumbled and hit the ground hard. The beam rolled behind me, landing on their faces again, still smiling, watching. I don't know how I made it out. The next thing I remember is crawling into daylight, gasping like I'd been underwater too long. The forest outside felt wrong too, quiet in a way that pressed against my ears. I sat there for a while, staring at the cave mouth, until I realized the light was still shining inside. It should have been lying near the entrance where I dropped it. But the glow was moving, slowly, deeper into the dark. Like someone had picked it up, I left it there. I didn't even go back for my pack. Just walked out of the woods and drove until I saw streetlights. That was 6 months ago. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm half asleep, I'll hear that echo again. My own voice, calling my name from somewhere deep and hollow. And every time it fades, I swear I can smell the earth, cold, wet, and breathing.